Outside of Germany during World War II, people around the world were appalled at the profound deceitfulness of Nazi propaganda, the ridiculous exaggerations, the outright falsehoods, and the astonishing acceptance of the German citizens. How on earth could intelligent, rational people have been convinced by all that schlock? The deportation and slaughter of Europe's Jews did not begin with actions, it began years earlier with words. So let's run through the 10 of the most effective Nazi tricks that Adolf Hitler and his shrewd propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels employed in Germany the decade before World War II even began, each one increasing in its level of sinisterness. Number 1. Appeal to the fears and anger of a constituency that feels they are being wronged or marginalized by the government du jour. In Hitler's case, he played upon the average German's fear they were being ignored by their own failing government and corporate industries. Germany was in its own Great Depression following World War I, with high unemployment. Number 2. Harken back to the good old days of historical pride in your country. In his speeches, Hitler shouted that Germany was once a great and powerful nation, and was in fact winning World War I until weak politicians and cowardly generals gave up and surrendered their country to the allies of Britain and France. Only the Nazis could make Germany great once again. Number 3. Portray yourself as an outsider, as the only one who can unite the troubled nation and fix the country's many problems. Play upon the divided parties of government with their do-nothingness and stagnation, leaving the door open for a tyrant like Hitler to step into the leadership vacuum with a radical populist message of the Nazis. Once in control, the weak government fell in line. Number 4. Use contemporary advertising techniques to convey your messages over and over again to the public. Hitler and Goebbels expertly used radio, the movies, posters, and pamphlets to flood Germany with their fascist message. Repetitive propaganda delivers a kind of feedback loop, each cycle reinforcing the one before. In the case of the Jews, it tapped into a deep-seated bigotry of the populace. Number 5. Repeat lies often enough, and the people will begin to believe they are true. Facts that do not support the narrative are deemed fake, and even unpatriotic, or better yet, treasonous. Your opponent's actions clearly show that they must hate their own country. The Nazis used huge rallies with fanatical crowds with great success to demonize any ideas that countered the Third Reich. Number 6. Intellectuals and journalists were suspected of being radical socialists, or even worse, the C word, communists. So discredit them as elites. Plant distrust with the populace in their own public universities, in their press, and even the judiciary, until such time that you control them from behind the scenes. Then they become your mouthpiece of propaganda. Number 7. Extreme nationalism resonates with those who see themselves as disenfranchised, even if they are technically middle class. So the demagoguery and totalitarianism of Hitler was ultimately seen as acceptable. The goal is not to gain 100% of minds, but 100% of emotions. So convince their hearts of your twisted vision, and the mind surrenders its logic. Number 8. Correctness, legitimacy, and even religious decency can be backburnered for the greater good of the country, sometimes for an entire generation. So bigotry, racism, xenophobia, and sexism were simply an ends to the means for the Nazis. We all think bad thoughts in private, so why not mainstream them? And ultimately shout them out loud, or better yet, take to the streets and act upon them. Number 9. You need a scapegoat to rally the people against. Those who don't look, think, or pray like us. A particular race, religion, or faction. In Hitler's case, it was the Jews and the migrant gypsies. They being the root cause of all the problems facing hard-working Germans. Portray them as dangerous, criminal, and even subhuman. After all, who could trust such people? Why risk it? Better to round them all up and deport them. Number 10. The exploitation of patriotism was the ultimate ace up the sleeve. Hitler spoke with fanatical pride in front of rows of Nazi flags and thousands of cheering crowds. He demanded blind deference to his leadership and his vision alone. Paint the opposition as unpatriotic, or better yet, traitors to their own country. When blind nationalism rules, it's then acceptable to employ the last and final step in power: violence. So, what lessons can we, as human beings, learn from all these real life examples? What does such a despicable time in history teach us a century later? Hitler was not the first, nor will he be the last this earth will see. Perhaps that we should not try to explain away fascism as an acceptable fringe group when it begins to gain traction. Accept the fact that good, rational, and even religious people will sometimes blindly support evil, with a near cult-like belief that it's absolutely acceptable and for the greater good. There is no need for us to call them names, for they have already named themselves with their words and actions. It is far more important to see this for what it is. Don't be a sheep. Call it out now and stop it in its tracks, lest we see history repeat itself yet again.